Welcome to session 5 in the academic and scientific writing presentation. So, we are going to talk about chapter 2 now. What are the things you need to include and how do you go about doing that? So, the chapter 2 is concerned with explaining the concepts and the theories relevant in analyzing, discussing, and understanding your work. What are the things I need to have a good idea of so that I can read your work and understand what you are trying to do? So, you are allowed to go extensive in this section because you need to provide a good understanding for people reading your work, and this section captured all the conceptual framework and the theoretical framework. So what are the major frameworks that underpins your entire research work? So if you talk about the theoretical framework, you're discussing the most relevant concepts or theories around your work. So you must highlight them. An elaborate explanation should be presented so that you help your reader to get a better understanding of what you are doing. So, you look through the literature, what are the general understandings that is in existence, so as to explain what you are studying. This is done with the sole aim of providing an understanding, a background understanding for your readers, so that they understand the lenses from which to look at your work. Let me give you an example. If I'm talking about criminal activities, crime and criminal activities, it will be relevant for me to talk about different theories around that work, that particular concept of crime and criminal activities. Some of them include the rational choice theory, the space-time constraint, optimal of origin concepts. All of these showcase the different perspective in explaining the phenomena of interest, in my case now, crime and criminal activities. So I need to touch upon these and explain them on how they influence or affect or impact crime and criminal activities. So this is necessary. These are the essential ingredients that your theoretical framework must capture. Then when you think of conceptual framework, this captures the thesis of your work. It is you that comes up with this conceptual framework, because this is how you bring together your understanding of the theory and how it relates to your work. If you look at my example here, but before I go to the example, let me explain it a little bit more. Your conceptual framework represents your own hypothesis of the interaction and the relationship between the variables and the factors within your work. It should showcase your understanding of the interactions and association and effect within the context of your work. So if I look at this example now, where I'm looking at human activities, the different forms of different human activities, vehicular emissions, industrial emission, burning of refuse and bush, transboundary emission coming from other parts of the from neighboring countries or from neighboring states and other places apart from where I'm currently studying. All of these contributes to air pollution, and they affect the trees and the shrubs in the sense that it modifies the acidity or the alkalinity of the bark, the outside covering of the trees. So all of these impact how lichens can grow. It's a particular organisms that grows on the bark of trees and shrubs. So the relative humidity, how much water is in the atmosphere, in the air, exposure to sunlight, pH of the bark, and the amount of air pollutants, they affect the lichens. Either they are going to be there, and the diversity in terms of the different types that you can find. So all of these affect lichens, so they affect their count and they affect their diversity. And their counts and their diversity can indicate the air quality. And this air quality is an aspect of environmental monitoring. So basically, all of these that I've presented are things that I've captured from literature. I'm now putting them together to create an understanding for my work, by which I'm using lichens to understand the level of air quality, and thereby providing an opportunity for environmental monitoring. So I'm putting different things together to create the hypothesis for my work, showing relationship among different factors and concepts in relating it to my major work, which is using bioindicator, using living things to understand air quality, and as such support environmental monitoring. So conceptual framework, this is an example of a conceptual framework. You should be able to show the linkages among factors and concepts within your work to generate your own hypothesis of what you are trying to do. So it is important that you look at your theoretical framework, you look at the theories, the bigger concepts within your work, and then you must also look at your conceptual framework, which captures the thesis of your own work. So once you have done your theoretical framework and your conceptual framework, the next thing is to now do the real literature review. This is where you explore extensively past work. Let me give you a trick which I follow. For each of my objectives, I make sure that I have a kind of literature review section or subsection for each one of them. Okay? You may adopt another idea, but from my experience, this is a much more effective way of doing it. So if one of my objectives is to assess community resilience of riverine community in Bayelsa State, then the first subsection under my literature review, which is going to be 2.21, is going to be assessment of community resilience. So which means I'm going to dive into literature and look at what other people have done about community resilience and what have they found out, which method have they used. So you must review works that relates to each of your objectives. That is my suggestion, and I think if you go through literature as well, you'll see that this is a good practice. So you start by looking at the global works that have been done globally, then you bring it down to what has been done within the continent or within the region, and then you move on to what has been done within the country, what has been done within the state of interest, locally, closer to where you are working. So you review from top to bottom. So you start with the area that is furthest away from you, and you come to the end with the ones that is closest to your area of study. So at the end of your literature review, you should also have a subsection that talks about gaps in literature. So these must include what are the areas identified in literature that are still incomplete. So for example, maybe somebody did a work and they said these are the limitations of their work, and they suggested that new studies or subsequent studies should look at this area. That is something that you can put in gaps that you have identified in literature. Okay, so gaps means the missing bits of our understanding about what you are trying to do. What are the things that other people have highlighted that needs to be done? Or what are the things that when you went through literature has not yet been explored? That is what you must have in your gaps in literature.